Hey everyone, it's Robin Riley for Bello's Designs. Welcome to my video tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to create a card on a piece of acetate. If you take a look, and I know there's going to be a lot of reflection here, and it's just like impossible for me not to get that reflection. But as you can see, the card base is made of acetate. Let me give you a quick peek inside so you can see. And I will discuss with you and demonstrate the steps to create this card. Before we get started on the supply list, I want to invite you to join us in our Facebook groups. We have two groups. We have the Bello's Design Lounge, and that's where we showcase all of our Lavinia products. The other page that we have is called the Bello's Design a la carte. That's where we showcase all of the other products that Patty currently has in her shop. We invite you to join us in both of those groups. We are on other social media platforms, just like Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok. And if you come over there, all you have to do is search this, the hashtag Bello's Designs. Would love to have you join us on all those platforms. Okay, let's get started on this acetate card. And let me show you the supplies that I'm going to be using. First of all, you need an acetate card. Here is the blank one. Now, I have tried using scrap pieces of acetate, and to be honest, I've not had a whole lot of luck with them, and I'm going to guess it's basically because of the weight of the acetate. So I have found by using this particular brand, Hero Arts acetate folded cards, I have much more success. These cards measure, I don't know if you can see that there, I'll kind of get it up there. They measure 4 1/4 inch by 5 1/2 inch. And this packet not only comes with 5 acetate cards, it comes with 5 white folded cards along with 5 matching envelopes. All right, that aside, let me show you what inks I'm using. Today I will be using VersaFine Clair in Nocturne, and I'll be using the Distress Oxide Evergreen Bow. And it's funny because, you know, when I first bought Evergreen Bow, I expected this to be a greener shade of evergreen, but it is more on the blue side, more like a turquoise. The stamp that I'm going to be using is May. LAV 750. I just think she's awfully sweet, how she sits in the cup of that flower. Now, the other supplies that I'll be using, I am going to be using 2 pieces of a heavyweight white cardstock, both pieces measuring 3 1/2 by 5 inches. Again, heavyweight cardstock, 2 pieces measuring 2 1/2 inches by 3 1/2 inches. The stencil that you see in the background, that is the Lavinia stencil called Ambiance. Now, I will be using my stamping platform, my Misty. I'll use that to stamp the one and only stamp that we're going to be using. I will be using a blending brush to apply the oxide ink to the background. And when I open this up, I hope you can pick up on it. It's extremely light. On the inner panel, I have also used that same Evergreen Bow oxide ink and just put a very light coating of ink. On the inside, I'm using one of the flowers from that May stamp just to give some interest. We'll discuss about the inside of this card when we get to that point. Now, as far as coloring the flowers that you see here, I just grabbed 3 colored pencils, a light, medium, and dark shade. These are Prisma color pencils, but you can use any color pencil that you have. These set happen to have the 3 shades of the teal that I was looking for. I just try to match up the color with the background color. If you look closely on the flower, maybe you can pick up a little bit of the glitter here. Same thing on the wings. And to achieve that, I used this Sakura Jelly Roll clear pen that has glitter. And when working with acetate, you need to make sure that your adhesive will stick to plastic, smooth surfaces. Not every adhesive will do so. So what I like to use is made by Beacon. This is Fabri-Tac. And yes, it's something that's always used with fabric, but I find that it works really wonderfully well on acetate. Always you need water and a microfiber cloth to just clean your stamp. Okay, let's get started with this card. I'm going to begin first with the 3.5 by 5 inch pieces of card. I'm going to just start with the top card itself. Let me grab my Misty. And we are going to stamp May. I'm going to just kind of center this so I can work off of the card a little bit. I want to get May somewhat centered in this stamp. I'm going to push her up just a little bit. I'm not going to be using the entire stamp. You'll see a little bit is going to be hanging off that card topper. I think that should be good. Now I do see I have something on my stamp. Let me try to get that off. Every once in a while you just get a little fuzz or goodness knows what on the stamp. Okay, I'm going to tap on the Nocturne VersaFine Clair ink. And stamping this in place, I am going to use this small tool that I have. A very good friend of mine sent me this. Those of you with arthritic fingers would love using this because it helps with getting even pressure applied over large stamps. Okay, I'm pretty pleased with that. Let me clean off my stamp. Again, just using water on my microfiber cloth. No need to use stamp cleaner whatsoever. Water works just perfectly fine. And keep in mind, if you have a little staining on your stamp, that doesn't hurt anything. The stamp will continue to work perfectly for you. Oops, here I am putting it away and I'm not finished. Okay, what I want to do, since this just shows 3 flowers, I would like to add a few more flowers in the mix. So what I'm going to do is give myself a little more room, first of all. I'm just going to slide this over. And I want to place 2 of these flowers and a little bit of the stem here on the side. So what I need to do is be mindful of her feet sticking out there. I don't want to get any ink on that area of the stamp. So there's a couple ways you can do that. One easy way is to take a jelly roll pen before you pick this up and put it on your acrylic block or your stamping tool. Draw a line on the back of your stem, showing where, on the back of your stamp, showing where you do not want ink to go. You don't want it to go on that side. You could even put an X there if that would help you. Just mark that area so that you're not going to get ink there. Does nothing to the stamp. It will wipe right off. So see, there I can see I don't want ink in that area at all. So I'm going to carefully tap some ink on those 2 flowers, making sure that I get the flower itself, a little bit of the stem, and I'm going to grab that cloth of mine and just get a little bit of that excess ink off where I didn't need any. Not that it's going to matter particularly, because that's going to be off the card, but I just do that to be in a good habit. Okay, so I'm going to press this into place. All right, so that gives me 2 more flowers. I am going to take the time to clean off this stamp so that when I place it down for another, I won't get any of that ink on my card. Now remember, I drew on the back of this stamp with that jelly pen. I'm just going to wipe that off. See, it comes off really easily. And I'll be ready to place another flower, which I do want this larger flower. Let me reposition my card again to give myself some more room. I want to get the larger flower over here on the side of the card. Now, once again, I need to be mindful not to get ink in that area. I feel very confident that I can do that simply because I have enough space in between those 2 areas. So let me, whoops, I need to move that over. That wasn't far enough. Got my stamp stuck in the hinge. So let me get that back in place. All right, I am just lining that up to get some of that big flower. Put another magnet there. Now I'm going to add my ink to that big flower. And a little bit on that stem. Now I did get a little ink on the fairy wing, so I am going to wipe that off with a cloth. Before I press down, oops, I see a little more ink I went off. Before I press down, I'm going to just hover to make sure I don't see any other ink in an area where I don't want it. Simply take my fingernail and scrape some of that off. All right, I'm going to press that flower into place. Okay, that's good for me. I'm happy with that. Gonna need a little more water. My towel's getting a little dry. All right, that's cleaned off. Now I want to do one more flower, and this time I want to place it in her hand. So I really like the larger flower on this stamp, so that's the one I'm going to be aiming for. So let me get that in place. And let me see, I think, you know what, I think I'm going to go to this flower. That other one was just a tad bit too big. I want it to look as if her hand is on the stem. Okay, and I'm going to bring that pen back in and I'm going to put a mark. I do not want any black ink in that area, nor do I want it in this area here. So let's see how well I can do with that. Mainly it's just this flower that I want to ink up. So I'm just actually using the corner of the ink pad to get that ink in around the top of that flower, trying not to hit any areas that I don't particularly want. Okay, I'm gonna clean just a tad bit off here. And let's hover once more and see. Let's see how that's going to fit. I think there's a little too much ink. So I'm going to remove the ink from that stem. Now pressing it into her hand. Okay, I'm happy with that. Now the little part of the stem that did not appear, I'm just going to draw in with a fine line marker to fill that area. And if you look carefully, I got a little bit of a smudge there. So, well, this will give me a good opportunity to share something with you. Okay, let me get a fine line marker, which I'm just going to use a Sharpie permanent marker, which has a very fine point tip. And I'm going to add the stem to that flower. just like that. Very simple. I did notice down here in this flower that a little bit of it didn't stamp. So I'm just going to draw in a fine line to finish that off. No one will know any different. Whoops. Now, that smudge that I have, I'm going to use a sand eraser made by Tombow. It's called a mono eraser. And all you have to do is very gently rub that on top of the smudge. What you're actually doing is sanding the top layer of the paper. So you don't want to do it hard because it will rip your paper if you push too hard. I see one more smudge that I'm not happy with. I'm going to go in there and remove that. Okay, that's better. All right, that looks good to me. I am pleased with how that looks. Now, before I go any further with this, I'm just going to set it to the side for a few minutes to dry. I'm going to bring in the inner piece of the card, that 2.5 by 3.5 inch, the center of the card. And what I'm going to do is simply, let me show you, stamp one more flower in the bottom corner, and that is simply to give some interest on the inside. You could very easily skip this part if you don't like it. I just thought it added a nice little touch. So once again, I'm going to place that, pick it up, and again, using the corner of the ink pad, I'm going in and just getting ink on that particular flower. Oops, there we go. Now, I do see a little bit that came over here. I'm going to remove it just to be safe. See a little bit here. Okay, that should be good. Quick press. There we go. All right, I didn't get much of a stem, so I'm coming in again with that thin line marker, and I'm just going to draw my own stem rather than risk messing up stamping again. Okay, so that centerpiece is done to the card. I'm going to, be doing a lot of coloring and inking, and I don't want to do any masking. So I'm going to let those pieces at this point dry, and I'm bringing in the other piece of card. Now this is the second piece that measures 3.5 inches by 5 inches. This piece is going to be the piece on the left-hand side, and I'm going to grab that stencil, place it down, get a little bit of that Evergreen Bow Distress Oxide ink, load up my brush, tap off some of the excess. Remember, I want to keep this very light. I'm going to put this on a little bit of an angle. And I'm just putting a very, very light coat just to add some interest. Plus, this is giving me an area inside this acetate card where I could write a small letter, a small message to the recipient of this card. And that's good enough. I don't want any more ink than what you are seeing here. Very, very light coating. Now, I'm going to hope that this is dried enough. So let's bring back that stencil. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in these white areas with some of that Evergreen Bow. Again, I don't want this to be like really dark by any means. I just want a light image of this stencil around all of the white area. Now, holding firmly, you can always lift to see where you're at, and if you need to add any more in a particular area, which, let me take a peek. I want to get just a little bit in here. Now, you could, if you wanted, use some type of masking to mask out that entire stamped image. But I think there's enough white space and you get enough room with this one that you can really work around it. The fact that we're going to be coloring with pencils that are similar in color here, it's going to work out okay even if you got some of this ink on the flower. So I'm peeking. I think that's going to be good. I'm going to call that okay. Let me hold it up where you can see that that's just a very light coat of that evergreen bough. All right, let me cover up my inks. Now, I'm going to show you how I color these. So starting with a light, medium, and dark in a turquoise color, I will place first the lightest color onto my flowers. And what I do is I just simply, very lightly, add a bottom layer. You know when you're ink blending, how you usually always start with the lightest color first and a very light layer? Well, that's what you do with colored pencils. You start with the lightest color and you apply just the lightest layer of that color. Now, when you're coloring with any type of colored pencil, I don't care if these are Crayola colored pencils or the most expensive colored pencils that you can buy, you always color using the side of the pencil. You don't use the point per se. You color on the side and just gently shade the color onto the piece. Now, if you push too hard, what will happen is you will get a waxy finish onto the piece that you're coloring. And once that waxy layer is established, you can no longer add more color. So, light hand, adding those colors. Now, it has happened to me where I have pressed too hard and I do get that waxy color. How to solve that issue is to come in with an eraser and erase as much of that as you possibly can. That typically will remove that waxy layer, and then you can go on applying more color. All right, almost done on that last flower. I'm also going to do her wings in the same way. I'm just adding a light color, a light shade of the lightest color that I have of teal into her wings. All right, moving on to the medium color. Now the medium color, I'm going to start at the base of every flower and just start to flick the color. Flicking, meaning I'm just going like this, literally flicking the side of the pencil up into the flower. I hope you can see the difference already. Again, I'm not using the point of the pencil per se. I'm using the side of the pencil to apply the color. I'm not going to the tip because I want the tips of the flowers to remain the lightest shade of teal. Okay, now I'm doing this rather quickly because I don't want you to get bored watching me color. So when you do this, I'm going to suggest you really take your time and flick slowly. Now, in this particular flower, we have these fine black lines, which indicate the direction you should be flicking that pencil. So here they're kind of bent, so my flicks are kind of bearing off to the left. Here, they're almost straight up and down, so that's how I'm going to continue with flicking. The back, I'm doing very little on those petals in the back. Okay, adding another layer here with the medium color, following those lines, simply flicking. Now you see how I do rotate my paper. You want to always work in the correct direction. So rotating your paper keeps you working in the correct direction, and you're not getting in all these odd configurations with your own arms, trying to go in the right direction. Move your artwork. Makes life so much easier. All right, let me get a middle layer here. Now, one of my favorite things to do is color, and I literally can take hours working on a project when I color, because I really get into all the layering that can take place. I'm doing this rather quick today, again, not to bore you, but really take your time when you add these layers to each of those petals. It is worth it, and it will pay off in the end. Okay, just a few more little areas to go here. As you see, I continue to rotate my card. Okay, one last petal here. Okay, lastly, I'll come in. Oops, her wings. Let's keep going. Let me add that. Again, I'm just going to flick this color into the wing, leaving the lightest shade at the tip top of each of these sections. Okay, here you can see how the flicking looks on those wings. Now let's bring in that last, the darkest color that I have. And I'm going to repeat the process. Now this time, instead of going all the way like to the center point, I'm just going to go up about a third of the way. So the first layer, the lightest color, went the entire length of that petal. The middle color went about 2/3 of the way up. And this dark color is only going up about 1/3 of the way. And that's a good way to measure how you want this to appear. So let me continue to add the last color to each of these petals. I hope you can see the difference in the three colors. Again, just like when we blend ink. This is the same process, it's just in pencil. Now those little petals that are in the far back, I'm not going to be putting any of this darker color in because you can't see them. That's going to help create some depth. There's a little bit there I want. A lot of times the small black lines indicate the shadowing, so that really does help too when you want to create shadows and depth in a picture, whether you're using ink or pencil or watercolor markers, whatever you like to color with. This could definitely be easily done with watercolor markers. Okay, let's get this last flower. A little bit in the back there. Okay, and one more flower here. All right, I hope you can see some of the depth in that. And same exact thing with the wing. I'm just going to do about the bottom third of each section of that wing, just to create the interest here. Okay. Now, like with ink blending, especially when you're using oxide inks, you know how you typically go back to the first brush you used and you go over everything to blend it? You do the same thing with colored pencils. So I'm taking that lightest shade of teal that I have, and I'm just going to very gently apply another layer over the entire flower. This helps to blend those colors together. It helps to take out any lines that you may have created by pressing too hard. You see, I'm not being too careful with this. This is the last coat, but all I'm trying to do is blend those colors together a little bit more. And it's giving another layer of this light color to the very tips of those petals. Okay. Let's just finish up these flowers quickly with a quick blend. And then I'm going to I'll hold this up closer. Maybe you'll be able to see. I'm hoping you're able to see the blend here. And again, I'm going to do the same thing with the wings. I'm just going to use that side of the pencil, blend the color all over. I always want each section of the wing to have some variation in it. Okay. Hopefully you can see the variation of the colors between the light, the medium, and the dark teal. Now, using that clear Jelly Roll pen that has glitter in it, I'm just going to add a few little wispy strokes at the base of each of the flowers. Just to add some interest, some glitter, some glitz. I'm not big on using glitter, but if that's something you like to use, you most definitely could use glitter in this spot. I just have never been a fan of glitter. So that's why when these pens came out, I was pretty happy to be able to get the sparkle this way. Now I'm going to take that same pen and I'm going to run it over the entire wing itself. Now, what's kind of neat about this pen is when you run it over the entire area, even though these are not watercolor pencils by any means, it really helps to blend those smoother than just using the pencil over the top. So I always like to add a layer of this pen over all the wings that I color, just to give a really pretty sparkle to that wing. Hopefully you can see that sparkle on the wing. Now, something I picked up from Eileen Godwin, oh my goodness, maybe over a year ago, to take it up another layer, to take it up another notch, make it look a little more artistic. What I'm going to do is, again, using the darkest shade of that teal that I have, I'm going to come in and I am just going to highlight some of the areas of the stencil. I'm not going to do every single piece. I'm just going to do some areas, again, just for added interest. Just kind of brings your eye in to see a little bit more of this. And I'm just randomly picking. I'm not trying to pick something for one reason or another. I'm just tracing around these shapes. Kind of gives it a little bit of depth, a little bit more interest. You may not like this part, and that'd be fine. You could just leave it as it is. I just kind of like adding this other layer. I think it just, again, adds another area of interest, another layer, another dimension to your card. So again, as much as you want here, you just can continue to play with this. But I think you see what I'm getting at here. It's just to add some interest to the card. Let me just add a few more to some of these areas. All right, I think I'll stop there. Now, let me show you how to assemble this. This is the part that can be a little bit tricky. Let me grab my acetate card. Now what I'm going to do is just take that FairyTale glue and I'm going to apply it all over the back of this card. I'm going to stay away from the very edge of this card because this glue is thick and it will ooze a little bit. Now I did find, just from working with this, that if it does ooze out onto the acetate, All I need to do is let it dry, and then I can remove it just like it was like rubber cement. Now you have a few seconds to play with this, and this will slip around and slide. So you have a little bit of play time to get this centered and in the position that you want it to be. This glue dries within a minute or so, but being that we're on plastic, it would slip if I really pressed on this. Now let me open it up and show you. Do you see what that looks like? Now, some people would leave this. Personally, I don't like the look of that, so that's why the next piece is brought in. I'm going to glue this on the top, matching it up the best I can over that front card to hide those glue marks. So you have a little more extra work to do when you are using an acrylic card base, because if you're like me, you want to cover up that spot that kind of looks, I don't know, not finished, kind of sloppy, I think. So I'm going to just match this up, corner and side to side. Okay, again, I have a few seconds to move it around. There, that looks pretty good. I'm not seeing much of it from the back. I think that's okay. I might be able to scoot it just a little bit over. There we go. All right, so now when I open it up, I have a finished area where, like I said, I could write my message or a little note to the recipient. I'm going to do the same exact thing to the back. Now, I cut these 2.5 by 3.5 inches. This is an ATC size. You could cut it the exact same size if you want as you did the front. But to me, that's just a little more work because you're going to have to line it up perfectly so that you don't see it when the card's closed. So I always downsize this piece somewhat. And here you could stamp a sentiment if you wanted. You could, however you wanted to finish off the inside, you most definitely could. All right, let me get that in place. And this I'm just going to, actually, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to center it on the front piece and then press it into my card. And the remaining piece, I'm going to just adhere to the back. Now, if you like to sign your cards, some of us have cards that say handmade by me or something handmade-ish, especially made by me. Some people actually have stamps that have their names on them. You could do that on this piece here, and that would be perfect. So I'm just aligning this with that piece in the middle. I'm opening up just to make sure I have it lined up rather well. And there it is. There you have it. What a fun little card. Now, granted, you could embellish this a whole lot more if you wanted. In the original card, I actually went ahead and took a gray pencil and did some shading under the flowers. You could do that, and what that does is it just makes, I think you should be able to see the difference here, kind of makes the flower pop. It gives it a tad bit more dimension. And to do that, honestly, it's pretty easy. You just come in with a light gray pencil. Think of where shadows would be if the light were pointing down from the top. And you just add fine layers of gray underneath those petals. Again, you could play with this and add these shadows over and over, and I can get lost in something like this. But it does add nice dimension to your flowers if you would add that little bit of gray for shading. It's very light, but it can be very effective. Okay, here's the original. I did a little bit darker of the stenciling here and a much lighter version on the right-hand side, but I think they're pretty cards no matter what. I think they're fun to play with. It's just something so different to send to friends, send to family. If you decide to try something on a piece of acetate, whether it be an actual card or even, you can just do bookmarks. Same process with the acetate. If you decide to do it, make sure you tag me, post it in our groups so we all can see your creations. Thanks so very much for watching. I appreciate you taking the time to do so, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.